papers. So
one other issue I have is the rental credit reference agencies and the rent, because I normally say to agents who are doing tenant finding for me that I want to reference the tenants myself. And the reason being is I normally just request copy passport, copy of visa if they need one. Obviously that way I can do right to rent checks. If they're employed, last 3 months pay slips and last 3 months corresponding bank statements. That gives me a huge amount of information because I can see their income, but I can also see what outgoings they've got going out of their account, like credit card commitments, any personal loan commitments, even maintenance, parties, things like that. And when I
don't the agent to do that for you as part of the setup?
They don't do any of that.
Really?
They would normally employ a third-party reference agency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what you presumably would do.
That's what I do, but they do all those checks anyway. They do the same thing. So
let's take a step back there. So the reason I'm not comfortable using these third-party credit reference agencies is I don't think their checks are amount to anything. I think they're useless.
Oh, really?
Reason being is they don't check anyone's outgoings. So essentially, all they're doing is they're checking someone's income, and they'll normally verify that with maybe an employer call. They will then do a credit check on the individual to check that there's no CCJs and things like that. But what they won't do is see what personal commitments are coming out of someone's account. And this would include things like credit cards, things like personal. So let's say you're netting 5K a month after tax. As far as their criteria will, their report will say, oh well, it covers the rent by X amount, so that's a green tick. But what it's not factoring in is maybe the 4 grand of credit commitments this individual has got, which means that really they've only got a grand's worth of disposable income.
Yeah.
So I come across this like time and time again with new agents I'm dealing with, where they're saying, Rahul, what you're requesting is too onerous. We can't request that from the tenant. And I'm thinking, well, it's something that they would have to supply if they were getting a loan, if they were taking a mortgage out, potentially if they're taking a mobile phone contract out. So I don't see how it's onerous. Obviously, I subscribe to data protection as well. So obviously any information is dealt with in confidence. I'm going by the same guidelines as you are. And
maybe on that basis, haven't I? I've always done that.
But you say it's unusual for landlords to do that, and most agents will just say no. We're going to use the third-party reference agency. Now, on all the ones I've followed up with, all the third-party reference agency I've followed up with, none of them has actually convinced me that they actually do checks on someone's outgoings. So I'm open-minded, and if you, I'd welcome you to just check with obviously who you use.
Yeah, well, no, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I would consider, but otherwise, to me, that's the huge flaw. It's a major flaw.
It is and it isn't, because what you're looking at their creditworthy history, whether their ability to pay going forward, but then you've got to assess their ability to have paid in the past as well. So this is where it's kind of
is it not relevant to know what their
no, because if you did a search on me, Raoul, you'd see that my income is a certain amount, my outgoings a certain amount, and I'm left with probably about 150 quid disposable income, at the end of the month. But that doesn't make me not a good tenant, because when I was a tenant,
I'm not saying it doesn't, but
no.
You will appreciate that as a self-employed individual, it's probably going to be more difficult for you than an employed individual to pass a rent check, which is why a lot of self-employed individuals have to pay 6 months, 12 months up front, and that's just the nature of the beast.
But that's what the referencing companies do, and they assess their ability, because if they haven't paid before, or if they've had issues before, that will be on their credit account. And we've had people.
I'm not disputing that. All I'm saying is, let's say they may not even have any previous history, but surely it'd be stupid or remiss for someone to not take into account what someone's personal loan payments are and what their committed outgoing is on their Range Rover. Or
I think you make a valid point, but touch wood, I've not really had many issues in my career, because we've selected the right person, we've done the right checks. And what we've also done is, with these referencing companies, they cross-reference data from before. So say, for example, you're asking for 6 months bank statements or 12 months, but you didn't know that 4 years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Smith didn't pay their rent to their landlord on their property for 6 months and done a runner. Whereas what we've got on some of these referencing companies, they do something called cipher checks, which they can cross-reference data. So say, for example, they reference through a reputable credit referencing agency and they've got that data available. They can say, well, actually, this tenant, because you might have them in a current property referencing their current landlord who's saying, yeah, they're great tenants, they're great tenants, oh, I just want rid of them, I want them gone, and I'll give them a good reference to get rid of them. However, 4 years ago, they racked up a lot of debt on a property that didn't go against their credit because they'd done a runner. However, they've got the details and the data from the cipher check.
Quite rightly, I think that there has to be consideration of both incoming and outgoing, and I get Rahul's point and I get David's point. And what I would say is for both is why I'm a bit middle of the road, is that Rahul would take it into consideration if our rent's company didn't do that and you did your check and you wanted further. I would say, why don't you have a discussion with the tenant? It's going to be
open it up. Yeah.
Every time with Rahul, David, over the years, and similarly, I'm sure, David, you do exactly the same, because that is the only way. And then, by and large, if the tenant's open for that, you're going to have a winner. So, and I think that is.
I agree with you. But if you're like, I mean, not saying I am, but say there was an individual that had a subscription to Babe Station or something like that, right? And they don't want to give up 3 months worth of bank statements because they have an addiction to something that costs a little bit of money, but it doesn't affect their ability to pay. But they have, I don't know, a need that needs satisfying. And they could probably be embarrassed by seeing certain transactions on their statement, which they might not want to give that up. All they can say is, David, you know, I fit your criteria. I fit the third-party referencing criteria. I've got an ability to pay. I've been fine over this period of time. I take, you know, offence to anyone want to go delve any deeper, because that's offensive to me, because I'm a professional. You know, why should you want to do these checks? Just like when you want to qualify a buyer, right? And you say to the buyer, look, we need to know you've got an ability to pay. And they're like, well, I've got cash in the bank, I've got funds, I'm a developer, and whatever it might be. Sorry about the accent. But, you know, they will take offence to you qualifying them. So, but in that situation, not at all. It's every time, there he is, looks like a DJ.
He's on his bedroom DJ. You're Calvin Harris.
Yeah, there he is.
This session. But David, Rahul heard the bulk of what you're saying. There has to be a fair compromise, and you're right. As long as you have it in writing and there's a fair share of data protection and everything is just between client to agent to tenant. I don't see an issue with that, and that's why I've always worked well with Rahul in that sense. And I've got another landlord client who I've dealt with since the start of my career. It's exactly the same. It's happy for me to do referencing myself, and to satisfy our own checks for our own back office thing. But equally, we also adhere to that. I know it's a double whammy, but and you're
right. You're right. If the client does want that, then you can ask the question. I mean, I had one a few years ago where the landlord said, she's very old school. She said, they're not married. I said, no. She said, well, should they get married before they rent a property? And I was like, well, maybe not. Who cares? And it's kind of like, it's also, I know it's funny, but it's circumstantial. And I think Rahul's not wrong. That's one way of doing it. Or there's various different ways to skin a cat. But as long as you protect it.
I have no issues with. I would not prescribe to my tenants about anything like that.
No, I'm just saying, but I want to go back to the whole rent and legal policy side of things, where, I mean, I always use the phrase of, for the cost of a Chinese takeaway every month, why would you not want to protect that asset? And Rahul's been very, very fortunate, and I hope he never becomes unfortunate. But when I used to not sell it, because I'm not a salesman, either you want it or you don't. But I would say to my clients, look, if I had because tenants lose their jobs, just because they lost their job doesn't make them a bad person. It could have been through redundancies, it could have been anything, or they could have got hit by a bus and they can't work again and they haven't got income protection in place. So they can't meet the rent payments, but you're going to suffer as a consequence. So I always would say, if you had a money tree at the bottom of your garden and you went away on holiday, would you want to insure it? Because what's to say your neighbour's not going to jump in your garden and chop your money tree down? I know it's a bit of a weird example to use, but that's your source of making money, isn't it? That's your money tree. You want to cultivate and protect that investment. So if you can, I mean, the thing is, court costs, legal fees and all that, they're mounting up. The time in which to get to court is mounting up. I mean, you know as well as anyone, Danny, you know, Section 21 is now 3 months notice, which they're probably going to extend. And then you've got the backlog of courts as well. It's just insane. So I'm an advocate of insurance, big time, because I just think it's better safe than sorry, you know. And we've had situations where people have lost a lot of savings. And as much as I'd love to think that every landlord out there does have a slush fund and stuff, they don't. And a lot of them can just about afford to pay for their gas safety certificates. I mean,
David, what about the concern? What about my concern that these policies won't pay out?
well, it depends on the policy. What you have to do is adhere to the codes of the policy. So with the ones that I've got, I know the policy details, so my landlords don't have to. So I know that I have to serve notice on a certain point. I need to evidence it. I know I need to demand the rent. I know I need to chase the rent. And I know I need to make every opportunity I can to help the tenant before it goes towards court, which is what we do as letting agents. We don't want our landlords going to court. We want to help tenants and help landlords. So those policies do pay out, but you've got to go with the right. Now, there's some that you'll get for 75 quid a year, rent guarantee and legal cover, 75 quid a year. That's the headline. But what's the small print? The small print is you've got to pay 1 month's excess. It'll only cover 4 payments. It won't cover vacant possession for 2 months up to 50% of the rent. So it's all about the quality of the policy. And I know that the company I use for referencing offer a good quality policy at that premium rate. And I know, you know, for you on that particular property, £1,000 for the year is quite a chunk, but you know, it's not really. It's cheaper than not having it if the tenant doesn't pay. So it swings and roundabouts. And again, circumstantial. There'll be a lot of landlords that have been landlords for 20, 30, 40 years, never needed it. There's some landlords that have relied on it 3 or 4 times. And it's just one of those, you know. There's not one size fits all.
Appreciate it. It's not for me. But and also, I mean, if any of my clients were taking out that, I'd need to have a chat with them. But mainly because different issues. They're probably doing other things wrong if they feel they need to take out a product like that. But
I didn't, because I've got a tenant up in Walsall, West Midlands, and she's a single mum with a little one, and that area, that's kind of the demographic that you've got. So I know that I could need to protect that asset basically, because you know, she's a lovely lady, she's a good girl, but there might be a time where she might not be able to pay. Touch wood, she's been a really good payer, but if there's a time where she can't pay, I'm reliant on that rent and legal policy. And because the rent is quite low, it's only £500 a month, it's only costing me £25 a month additional. So for me, it's an absolute no-brainer, because £25 a month as opposed to losing £475, I know what I would choose. So that's why it's all circumstantial, whereas, you know, you run your portfolio in a way that you would probably expect others to do it, but others run things in a different way and don't have certain incomes available.
Appreciate it. I wouldn't want, obviously, vulnerable people to be paying for something that is never going to pay out as well. So
yeah,
that's just the only concern I've got.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Obviously, you know, in the past we've got a history of big mis-selling scandals in this country in relation to PPI, and then also in relation to a lot of, I recall like in 2007, 8, a lot of banks I was dealing with on commercial loans were basically saying, look, we're not going to do this deal unless they take a hedge product, you know, to hedge the interest rate.
Additional selling, isn't it? Yeah.
Again. So, you know, at the time they were saying, oh, this is to cover your back in the event of, like, you know, interest rates rising too much and such. So it can all be sold a certain way, but that, again, huge mis-selling scandal.
Well, it depends how you do it. I mean, I'm very tentative with it, and I say, look, would you like this? This is what the product is. This is what you benefit from. Here's the details. If you want it, it's that. If you don't, it's fine.
Whereas David, you're doing everything in good faith, yeah? You're doing everything in good faith, acting in the best interest of the client. All I'm concerned about is that in the event of a claim, it doesn't pay out.
But it does. That's the thing. The policies I use I can't speak for any other policies out there because I don't know. But the policies I use pay out, and I've seen them pay out. So that's why I can continue to have that confidence in them. If I had a situation where they didn't pay out, I'd be like, do you know what? No, I'm not going to offer that.
Yeah, that's the risk you get. But if you're reading the small print and you know your product, as what you just said, that is the disclaimer. That is the route. I've had products where I've sat and actually read everything, and I was the only one in, you know, wherever I was working that did that.
Yeah.
And actually recommended to a landlord. They were very interested, and I said, do not do this because I have fears on X, Y, Z. And they loved it because I protected their interests, which is what we're meant to do.
Well, this is it. And when I worked in, I left one agency to go to another, and that agency were working with the same referencing team, the same insurance team, the one that I work now, but they chose to put a month's excess in on that policy because it was additional income for them. And I thought that's not in the best interest of the client. And I approached the referencing company, so we can't discuss it with you. It's dealt with operations. And it's just like, so I had one landlord, he had 2 months arrears, and he got 1 month payback, but then he paid another month in excess to the agent. And I said, well, one, it's good that they pay out, but two, this policy is not fit for purpose. And I said that, and they sat down with me and they said, David, these are the words. They said, David, who do I need to speak to at Arla to get you to sell more rent and legal cover? And I'm thinking, right, I'm having an appraisal off the back of a month where I've done 426% of my target. I was the best in the country, right? And they're telling me about selling rent and legal insurance, which was, pardon my French, dog doo-doo. You know, a month's excess, that's not good value. 0 excess, that's fine.
What commission payment do you get, David? What
well, it depends. I mean, very little. I mean, I don't know what the big agencies will charge, say, an extra 1% back. You know, for me, it just covers the cost of the admin of my policy. So it's a couple of quid. So for me, it makes no odds, and I don't want to push a landlord.
So there's not, because that's good to know, because I think one of the issues with some of those previous payment protection policies, which were subject to a lot of mis-selling, was the huge commissions involved. So
and they don't declare it. We have to declare it.
Obviously, if incentives are aligned a certain way, there could be certain people that may obviously, you know, sell
exactly.
in. You know,
and that's why
should, you know.
We have to declare that in our terms of business to our client. You know, we will charge a commission of this amount. It's the same with estate agencies, with conveyancing and bits and pieces like that. You know, mortgage advisors, if they're referring into that person, they've got to let the consumer know that they stand to make a commission and how much. And that's where a lot of them fall foul. There's agents across the country that are still not doing that now.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's a common thing. That's why it's all trying to clean. It's not even trying to clean up the industry. We've got a whole thing, Rahul, as well on regulation of property agents, where every agent has to be affiliated, and that's coming in 3 to 5 years. I'm sure you're aware, and it means that, you know, Arla and other providers maybe, but Arla Property Market will be the leader, most likely. They will have to qualify, and that is one of the criteria that you have to know to pass the exams. Is you have to disclose any commissions, and like the finance sector, and you know, until that happens, we've still got a few years of this going on, which is quite bad.
Frustrating. Yeah, I mean, there's still agents out there that don't have client money protection, and they've been given another year's grace on it. And I think, well, it come in 2016. No. When did it come in? 2017? Yeah, and it's been in place for that amount of time. They've had a lead up to it, right? And then they've given them another year. And I just think that's bizarre because banks won't do this. And I just think that's why we've been in such a bad state with a lot of them, because people have run off without having client money protection.
Yeah.
Do you register deposits on behalf of your landlords, or would they normally do it themselves?
No, I do it all for. Well, all of the managed and occupied units we do it for them. We offer it as an additional service to our let-only clients, or we allow them to do it. However, if you look at the legal side of it, so say for example, Raoul, you were renting through me, and you said, yeah, I use my deposits. I say, okay, well, if I'm going to collect the first month's rent to take my fee and the deposit for you to transfer across, I need to know that you've registered that deposit before I transfer that money, because in the eyes of the law, I've collected the money from the tenant, so I would need to see that that deposit's registered before I transfer it across. So there's so many legal loopholes and bits and pieces you have to jump through. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, yes.
You use the insured-based scheme or the custodial?
No, I use custodial because I don't want to hold any deposit money. I want it to be in the scheme. Because the thing is, there's companies out there that use the insured scheme and they make a huge amount of interest. They might hold 100 grand's worth of deposits and they're making the interest on it. Whereas I want it to be.
I use the insured actually. I use the insured because I want control of the money, rather than some third party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I use custodial because it's away from me. I don't have to account for it. It's in tenancy deposit scheme, and it goes through the correct channels and legal procedures there.
The thing is, it's safer for agents to do that. Landlords, I understand with insured for landlords. I see the bulk of my portfolio landlords do use the insured scheme for TDS or DPS, because I know that they, as Rahul just said, they're one individual. They're accounting for themselves. Us being a company and the intermediary, and as agents, custodial is a more sensible, secure, and easier accountable option. That's why, Rahul, the majority of agents use custodial.
Also, I had another question about checkout inventories. I generally never do a checkout inventory, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I generally am always giving back 100% of my deposit back to my tenants.
Well, you wouldn't be able to any other way because you haven't done a checkout. Do you do an inventory when they move in?
I do. Yeah, I do an inventory when they move in.
What, you personally?
No,
I use a third-party firm to do it.
Okay.
When they go in.
So yeah, the thing is,
when they go out, I'll check it out myself. And if I'm giving all the deposit back, I don't bother using it.
Well, that's at your discretion. The only thing you've got to be mindful is if you take a deposit, you've got to have an inventory anyway, which you do. So you've got the inventory, got the deposit in place. You do the checkout to coincide with the original inventory. So the condition when they moved in married up with the condition when they moved out. And you'll want to know, is there any deposit deductions? But then you've got to follow the procedure of the checkout. I mean, we've had situations where landlords have...
Surely it's only relevant if I'm looking to take a deduction. If I'm not looking to take a deduction, why would I incur extra cost?
Well, it's your shout at the end of the day. If you go in there...
What benefit would it be for me in paying an extra few £100 to get a checkout inventory if I've already decided I'm happy to give the full deposit back? There's no issue.
How have you already decided? Have you what's given you that decision?
Me doing a walk around of the property, and also me realizing that if there's any other minor damage that I missed, I'm prepared to take it on the chin. I'm not going to go back to the client after.
Yeah. Well, that's your prerogative.
We always leave on great terms. It's almost like a member of family leaving. It's like, so yeah, exactly.
That's fine. Look, it's circumstantial. If you're happy that you're going to do that, that's fine. But if you have that one time you go in there and you say, oh crikey, they've destroyed the place, I need a checkout, it's too late, because what you've done, you've invalidated the checkout. So you could then go, right, I'm going to get a checkout done.
No, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. So again, if you're happy every single time your tenant checks out, that's fine. So for you, there would be no point. However, if there was a situation where you did have that anomaly of a tenant and your neighbours said to you, look, Raoul, before you come over, just let you know they had a wild party last night and I had things being smashed. So I'm just worried what you're going to find. And then, you might go in there, invalidate a possible checkout, or like you said, just take it on the chin. So again, circumstantial, but the norm is basically not every tenant leaves it how they find it, and the biggest claims we get are cleaning, because a landlord will clean the property and go, oh, it's wonderful, I had it lovely, nicely cleaned, I had my penny on, I had my marigolds on, and it was amazing, and you did your inventory and then got it back and it was filthy, and we said, okay, well, your idea of a clean is different from that of a tenant. So if you haven't got a pro clean when they moved in, then there's no obligation for them to get one when they moved out, and guess what, you're going to have to do a clean yourself. So again, it is circumstantial, and we'll have situations where it's been pro-cleaned, gone in, tenants have not got it pro-cleaned, we've done the checkout, we've made findings, we've gone through the checkout report, it's taken hours, and we've worked, there's actually £250 of professional cleaning, £400 worth of damage, and then we've got to go through the negotiation process. So again, it's circumstantial to each property.
Yeah. And on that note, I think that has been a fabulous discussion. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you all. And post, we'd like to have you both back post lockdown to see how things have moved on and see if there's any advances on what we've discussed.
Sounds good. It's been
Absolutely.
fun. And have a great day, both of you.
Yeah, you too. Great to meet you, Raoul.
See you later.
Likewise. Take care, guys.
Care.